In this lesson, we are going to look at the important topic of thumbnail tags. Now, thumbnail tags are often associated with posts, but they also work for pages and custom post types as well. In order for post thumbnails or other type of thumbnails to work, they have to be enabled in our theme functions.php file. So the easiest way to do that, or actually the only way to do that, is to use add theme support for post thumbnails. Now by default, if you use this on its own, it will just work for posts. However, add theme support when working with post thumbnails takes a second parameter where you could pass it an array of other post types. So we could specify post, page, etc., etc. And if you have custom post types like events, you could put those in this array as well. Now, what's interesting about this, if you have a theme that has post thumbnails enabled and you add those post thumbnails to your posts or pages, and then you change your theme and it no longer has those supported, not only will you not see them on the front end, but you won't see them on the back end. They will still be saved in the database, but you might not be able to access or add them unless you have them enabled in your theme. So, once you have these post thumbnails enabled in your functions.php file, it could also be done through a plugin as well, but in this case we're looking at in a functions.php file, then you could begin to look at the specific template tags that you could use to display thumbnails. When we look at the thumbnail tags available, they are pretty simple and straightforward. First, we have has post thumbnail, and that is just checking a conditional statement, or it's a conditional tag, checking to see if a thumbnail exists. Now it says post, but could also work for page and other custom post types as well, and that goes for all of these. Then we have the most common of these, which is the post thumbnail, and this will take a few parameters based on what size we want, or if we want to add other HTML attributes to the image tag that it puts out. And then we have get the post thumbnail, which works very similarly, except it just gets a value and doesn't echo it onto the page. And finally, we have get post thumbnail ID, which could be helpful. Sometimes you want to save that thumbnail ID and then do other queries with it, or just pass it into another query to get more information about that image itself that you might not be getting with the post thumbnail. So let's take a look at a little of these in action. Now in this example, we're making use of two template tags. We're using has post thumbnail to do a conditional check, and then if there is a thumbnail, we use the post thumbnail to echo it out. Now, while this may be considered a common and safe-proof approach, if there is no image or thumbnail or featured image, because a thumbnail is really the featured image for it. Thumbnail is kind of an older name. Featured image is what we most commonly refer to it and how it's labeled in the admin area. And if there is not a featured image or thumbnail associated with a post or page, etc., this line of the post thumbnail will not echo anything out onto the screen. So really, in this case, we don't really need it to be there, but it is a good practice. You might want to add other stuff around with your thumbnail that you don't want appearing, but it is helpful to know that if the post thumbnail is put in place there and there is no image, it won't echo out like an empty image tag and do something like that on the page. So this is kind of a most basic setup. However, the post thumbnail takes two attributes. One is a string for the size, or it could take a specific size outline, but you have a few custom default ones that come with WordPress, and then a series of attributes that are mostly HTML attributes that you would associate with an image tag, like an alt attribute or a title attribute, things like that. So here's an example of the post thumbnail with attributes and the size being passed in. We can see for attributes, we're adding additional items onto class. So we want to have an MIG class and a featured class added. And then for the title of the image, we want it to be the title of the post. And we can't say the title because it'll echo out onto the page. We have to say get title, so it saves it as that value. Then you could see when we actually call the post thumbnail, we pass in a string of full, which is meant to represent whatever the size is that we want. And there are a few different, like I said, default sizes as well as custom sizes you could set up. So from here, let's take a look actually at the documentation for the post thumbnail to look at all the sizes and attributes and stuff. And then we'll finish off taking a look at some code of all of this in action in a theme. So if we come over to the documentation for the post thumbnail and come down, we could see that it takes size and attributes, although it doesn't give us what these specific ones are. However, if we scroll down to the user notes, we could see here that there are a few default WordPress ones that come thumbnail, medium, large, full, and it gives you the default sizes for all of those as well, so you know what to expect. And then if you have WooCommerce set up, you could also get some other options for use there. We can see in this other example here, it's showing us that we could pass an argument for attributes of class, We could pass the title. You could do the alt tag, stuff like that, or the alt attribute, stuff like that. So let's hop over to the code now to get a more hands-on look at how this is going to work. And before we do that, we need to stop off in the admin area because all of these sizes that are default here can also be customized. So in the WordPress admin area under settings media, you can see that we can control how WordPress will size images. And every time you upload an image to the media gallery or via post page, etc., it is going to automatically create a thumbnail, medium, and large size for you to use of that image. Now, while this is really helpful and it comes with good defaults, you could also change these. However, if you change them and you already had images uploaded, it will not go back and change old images. It will only work for new ones. So as just a side note, there is a plugin called Regenerate Thumbnails, and what this will do is if you make changes to any of those sizes in the media library, you could then go and regenerate all the thumbnail sizes for past images that you've uploaded. So if you are ever in need of setting those custom, which is totally possible, you might want to check out this free plugin as well. So now let's come over to our code and look first at our functions.php file. And we can see here that I've got theme support post thumbnails with post and page enabled. So now if I were to go into my theme for any post or page, I could add a featured image or thumbnail. So if I were to come into one of my posts, for example, in my admin area, I would see an option for featured image. I'm using just a basic image that I have here. It doesn't really matter what you use as long as we pick something. And I'd pick something a little bit bigger so that you could play around with the different sizes. If you upload a 100 by 100 pixel image, then it won't really give you the full range of what's possible. So from here, now that we have this all set up, and again, if I were to comment this out, we wouldn't have these options. Now we could look at what we need in our template code to have this display on the page. So what I'm going to do is come into the index.php file, and by default, I'm just calling the post thumbnail, and this will display a full-size image of the featured image. And if I look at my blog page on the front end, we could see that for Hello PHP, which had this image applied, then that image is now showing up there. However, we could customize this and get quite a lot of different options if we like. So coming down, all of this is commented out, but you could see the post thumbnail passing thumbnail as the size, and the size that you'll get by default, we could pass medium, medium, large, large, and full. And I'd say that thumbnail are super useful, medium sometimes is, and definitely full is useful as well. Then down below that, we have another example here where we pass in thumbnail. You could pass in whatever we want, and we also have some attributes set up. So I just want to uncomment that one and show you what that is all about. So let's uncomment that and save it. And what we're going to expect to see is now as classes passed in, we're going to have some extra classes there. We'll have a title and we'll have an alt attribute, which are all helpful. And then calling it, we're just passing those attributes in as a second parameter and setting the size to thumbnail. So now if we refresh our site, we should see something a little bit different. This is great. So we've got a thumbnail size, and with a little CSS, we could float it off to the side. That'll be something that you could play around with during practicing all of this. However, this shows pretty much the good range of how to include posts. And again, you could do this on posts, pages, etc., as long as you enable it in your functions.php file. So from here, what I'd encourage you to do is go over some of the different functions that we talked about, maybe rewind this and watch over anything that you might want to catch a second time. And then from here, we'll go on and start practicing adding these into our theme and styling them and making them look good and contextual.